Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Bricktown Urban Design Committee meeting, March meeting to order. Paula, if you please.
Omar Curry.
Present.
Jonathan Dodson. Ava Scaramucci.
Present.
Sandino Thompson.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Item number 2 on our agenda today is the approval of the previous meeting's minutes.
So moved.
A second. We have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. There are no cases withdrawn. There are no continuous requests. Is there anything on the consent docket today?
No, sir.
Okay. So we go to item number 6, cases for individual consideration. Item 6A, case number BCA-17-000001 at 100 East Sheridan. Staff?
Yes, this is an application for the site at the southeast corner of East Sheridan Avenue and North Oklahoma Avenue for a brand new 10-story hotel. The site is currently occupied by a surface parking lot. It's adjacent to the Brewer building to the south, a couple of 2- and 3-story office buildings to the east, another surface parking lot to the west across Oklahoma Avenue, and to the north across Sheridan is the 6-story spaghetti warehouse building. Want to update the committee on a couple of things that have happened since the agenda packet went out last Tuesday. First of all, the day after the packet went out, we got new information from the applicant, which indicated that they would be able to provide a brick masonry wall enclosure around the trash enclosure on the south side of the building facing Flaming Lips Alley. They received permission from OG&E, who has the easement over which the enclosure sits, and they did receive permission from OG&E to do that masonry structure to provide that enclosure. The reason that's important to you is because the staff report went into a lot of detail about this issue, and a variance was required for the wood enclosure, and we had a recommendation in the staff report for you to make a recommendation on the variance request and so on and so forth. That's no longer necessary because the enclosure they proposed does meet the code and no longer requires a variance. So that's one item off your table. Do, however, want to point out that we also have a guideline that suggests that buildings such as this, in this configuration and proximity to the alley, should incorporate their trash enclosures as a trash room as part of the structure of the facility. So that's another wrinkle for the committee to take into consideration and determine whether or not what they've done with the enclosure that's freestanding attached to the building as opposed to being enclosed and integrated into the building is sufficient for your taste. Secondarily, we received information from DOKC, who owns a variety of materials and features that are on the existing site and in the right-of-way near this site. And a lot of those features would be either removed and demolished and thrown away or relocated. And through cooperation between DOKC and the applicant, they've worked out some details that they're going to cooperate in trying to secure those features that are their property and work in coordination with the applicant to at least get those items in the hands of DOKC so they can be relocated to another site within Bricktown. And to us, the most important feature, I think we mentioned it in the staff report, is the flagpole. It's a pretty iconic feature of the Bricktown, and it would be a sad story to try and lose it in replacement for the hotel. We were actually talking about trying to put the flagpole on the building somewhere, but I think that it's going to go a different direction now with DOKC and the applicant cooperating on that in that regard. So with that being said, we've provided the committee with a recommendation for approval of the project. And again, well, actually, we actually that it be continued. I'm sorry about that. But now that we have seen the plans that show, and the applicant will be able to prepare to pass out drawings that show the trash enclosure with the brick wall. We would like to change our recommendation to the committee to recommend approval of the project with the enclosure being a brick facility. That completes our comments. We're prepared to respond to any questions the committee may have.
I do have one question, Michael. Who does own that flagpole? That's been in debate for many years.
Mallory from DOKC is here. She can respond to that directly. It's my understanding it was funded by a variety of sources, including the Brewers, and
Yes.
There's maintenance that is undertaken by DOKC.
Yes.
And they cooperate with the police department to have the different
That's
flags
correct.
raised and lowered. So
But I was just wondering who really owns that?
I believe DOKC owns it, but it's on the property owner's property. It's not in the right-of-way. So it's
Okay.
a matter between them to settle out how they transfer ownership.
I think we did a little bit of digging and history on it. So it was funded from the first 4th of July sponsorships
Yes.
that happened in Bricktown in partnership with the Brewers.
That's correct.
So that is the funding behind of it. Technically, the Bricktown Association owns it right now because the Brewers, Brent, said that we gifted that to the district when we put that in place.
Okay.
So I think we, as a board of directors and the staff, DOKC, technically own the pole.
Okay.
So I think the conversation right now is just we'll take possession of that, and then at our next Bricktown board meeting, it'll be a conversation on multiple ideas on new locations.
Okay. That and the bricks.
Yes,
The
the
names.
memorial, so we talked about the memorial bricks, the flagpole, and then the serpentine bench that can all be removed from this site and then put at the new location.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And the locations for the memorial bricks as well haven't been determined yet either.
I think the plan was they would all be at the same spot, so with the new flagpole.
Okay. Any more questions?
Not concerning that item, no.
Do we have a presentation to look at too?
Good morning. I'm Scott Dedman with ADG. I've got about an hour and a half presentation to make to you guys this morning. So we are representing a niche hotel group, Andy Patel. And we were starting to look for inspiration on this and found this nice aerial photograph of early days of Bricktown. And one of the things that we noticed right off the bat is really this concentration of large buildings on the west side of Bricktown. We felt that was really kind of interesting, and that this was such a prime site, and really had never been fully developed. I think there was a restaurant and a gas station there at one time and some things like that, but never was one of the large warehouses in that location. But we started looking for inspiration of the buildings and looking at for the building, looked at some of the historical photographs of Bricktown and some of the details. Of course, this is the spaghetti warehouse building originally, and one of the things that we noted on this were the groupings of the windows and the way those were created, and then the the base of the building and the stone base of that as inspiration. Of course, this is the ACM building now. And this is the building on the corner of Sheridan and the tracks, and prior to having 2 additional floors added to that. So it started out as a much lower building and then grew. This is the U-Haul building, or what's behind the metal siding on the U-Haul building. But again, the way the sort of the vertical groupings of windows were unique. We thought the massing and the proportions of this building were interesting. I have not been able to locate where this building actually occurred in Bricktown, other than the photographs that we pulled it from were of Bricktown buildings. And of course, some of the recent hotels that have gone up, the Hilton, we're at 117 feet, and the Hampton at 95 feet, so some fairly tall buildings in that area. The new hotels that are going up or have gone up. And so this project, we're at 120,000 square feet, and we're on a really small site. Our buildable area is about 130 by 130, so about 17,000 square feet. We're getting 182 guest rooms out of that. Our average parapet height's about 117 feet, and then we have one stair tower that extends to the roof, and it goes up to 127. And it is all post-tension concrete construction, so it's a really good quality building with a VTAC mechanical system. So again, a shot of our site, and again, you can see the sort of this concentration of large buildings, and that has now extended down Sheridan quite a ways. I'm sure you're all familiar with the site. It was our parking lot for many years. Some of the adjacent buildings. The Spaghetti Warehouse across the way it sits now. Of course, the brewery. And the proposed garage that we brought to you 6-8 months ago now. Don't know the schedule on that at the present time, but it's still in the planning phases. ACM would be to the southwest of our building. So here's our site. So we've really got a buildable area of 130 by 130, and part of that is because of this 10-foot utility easement. That's actually it's within our property lines, but it's an OG&E easement that serves the transformers for several of the buildings in the Bricktown location. So that's what Michael was discussing originally in our conversations with OG&E. They did not want any heavy footings on top of that easement, but they have agreed to allow us to do brick walls around the trash enclosure now. The developer is in discussions with the bank on the ATM about possibly relocating that ATM within the hotel. And then, of course, we've had the discussion on the memorial and the flagpole. During the purchase of the land, there was a 22-foot building separation set, so there will still be a pedestrian alley between the new hotel and the existing buildings, so that you can cross through and get to the buildings that sit on the canal.
And how wide is that, Scott?
22 feet.
So there where the stairs are going into the west side of the building?
Yes,
Go up this,
and
okay.
they will still be accessible.
Okay.
So this is an aerial of the project site. We did have some discussion with, I think it was with planning, may have been with traffic as well, but really this is the only real opportunity that we have for a drop-off. Really was the feeling that we don't want to do anything along Sheridan, and that really the congestion would be much less if we looked at having the main entry to the hotel or the drop-off for the hotel on Oklahoma. So as we look at the site plan, again, here's our main drop-off, and we've got a curb cut that extends down Oklahoma to drop people off. And then along Sheridan Avenue, we have a second entrance that enters into the bar restaurant area, so a separate door for that. So we have entries both on Sheridan and on Oklahoma, and they can both access the lobby of the hotel as well. And then, of course, our service entry is off of the alley. This would be the enclosure for the the dumpsters. And we also have a transformer that sits in that easement as well. The sidewalks, of course, would be replaced with brick sidewalks that would match the Bricktown sidewalks, so we would work to match those. And then on the ground floor, all of the sort of the front of house faces either Oklahoma or Sheridan. So we have a large bar in this area, the lounge area that's both services the bar and is also a waiting area for the hotel, and then the lobby of the hotel, again with the main entrance coming in off of Oklahoma. Again, this is a very tight site, and so we've had to work hard to get all of the functions that we need onto that ground floor. We've had to work with Marriott quite a bit to get them to relax some of their requirements because we physically did not have the space to get everything in that Marriott wanted. And, so they have reduced some requirements on staff space. They were originally wanting male and female locker space and things like that they have backed off on and allowed us to simplify that somewhat. But of course you can see we have a large electrical, we have the fire communication point, the fire pump area, and then the service entrance. So that side of that north-south side of the hotel is pretty well packed with functional items. So it's really hard to try to create a trash enclosure and use that space. So we really would like to use that space that we have as part of our property, that 10-foot easement, as the trash enclosure space. The second floor, there's an open grand stair in the corner, and that opens into the meeting room area that looks out onto Sheridan, and then the remainder of that floor is guest rooms. And so the configuration of the building is L-shaped on top of the sort of the podium of the first floor. And then all of the upper floors above the second are all guest room floors. There's 22 rooms per floor. This was some of our initial massing studies, and so it's a fairly large building that's going on that corner. So we wanted to take a look at that and see how it felt. We looked at several configurations, maybe reversing the L and reducing the corner mass a little bit, but ultimately it felt better to take that corner and have the building sort of prominent on the corner. And so this is the massing that we're looking at. Just kind of a quick study looking down Sheridan Avenue at sort of the relative heights and masses of the adjacent buildings. And some of these, of course, are proposed. The office building that is proposed, and then the parking garage. But you can see the scale between our proposal and the Hampton and the Hilton and even the Bricktown garage. And so, if we started out with just a typical brick building with punched openings in it, it was going to be a pretty massive building. So we wanted to look at how we could break that scale down a little bit. And one of the ways we did that was to use some curtain wall glass on some of the upper levels. So by taking that and breaking that down into some smaller elements, we brought the scale or the apparent scale down. So we let the dark glass of the curtain wall recess and the brick pop a little bit. One of the other things we wanted to look at, this kind of goes back to the spaghetti warehouse building, is creating this base at street level, this two-story base. So not only does it kind of relate to spaghetti warehouse, but in height it relates to the adjacent buildings as well and creates a little bit more scale at street level. And then looking at the fenestrations, once we start creating some transparency into that lightens that space, using a sort of a traditional pattern of grouping windows into vertical elements on the facade, and then the openings in the stone base. And the other thing we've done is to create canopies along the street to really create some shelter along the street. And then these are the renderings of the building. So you can see the curtain wall at the top, the brick elements that sort of separate it and make it feel like multiple buildings as opposed to one large building. This would be a view on Oklahoma looking to the north. This would be the main hotel entry. This is the alley looking to the west. This would be a combination of brick and stucco on the alley. It's pretty traditional on the warehouses to change materials as you go around the corner and back to the alley area. Close-up of the entry of the hotel and the drop-off area. And this would be along Sheridan. Again, we're pulling out some patio areas, some outdoor dining space, a little bit of a landscape buffer and a railing, almost a drink rails type railing. And this is Sheridan looking west. And this is the materials. We actually have the samples of materials here with us today if you'd like to see those, but it's a pretty traditional red brick that we're using. It's more of a dark burgundy. A CSMU base, and then the black surrounds at the entries are granite. Then in the spandrel glass in the curtain wall area, we're using a tinted glass, a darker glass. The ground floor glass will be a clear glass, and the punched openings into the guest rooms will also be a clear glass as well. Of course, we just have the assorted metals for the canopies and the cap flashing. And then finally, just a night view of the project. This is the corner that opens up and has the staircase in it. There's actually a lounge seating space at the ground floor level as well as at the intermediate landing level. So it could be a pretty cool place to sit. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Scott.
I do have a few questions.
Sure.
Scott, can you tell me how this works with the streetcar? I believe the streetcar will be actually...
It's actually on the other side of the street, right.
So does this area that comes out where the flagpole is currently, is that flat surface so the streetcar will just drive over it, or how does that work? Because it's my understanding that the streetcar goes straight along the curb where the parking spaces now exist on the south side of Sheridan. So I was wondering how that I think that's where the flagpole pretty much in close proximity is located now. How does that work?
Flagpole sits within the property lines.
Yeah. But if it goes straight across the street following the curb, am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, I believe it doesn't follow the curb, it follows the lane of traffic.
Right.
So if you're parked in those spots, you're going to have to wait till the...
I was told I would lose all of the parking spaces.
Oh, well, then the curb is moving out. Yeah.
So the curb is moving out?
I believe so.
Well...
I'm not clear.
I know the streetcar runs in the street.
Well, it's kind of an odd area, though, where it is on that block because it goes from... it narrows, the street narrows.
Right.
So the lane that is now parking, it was my understanding that would be where the path of the streetcar.
Avis, we'll verify that. We honestly, we should know.
I mean, I may have misunderstood, but we've met on, because there's a stop right there in front of the painted door.
Right.
And I just thought that...
Is your curb line moving?
Not that I was aware of.
I think that there's a difference at this end of the block versus the east end, and that's because there's a stop right before Mickey Mantle or Walnut.
It's right in front of my door.
So the stalls would be lost on that end of the block for the station, but on the west end of the block, I think the parking stalls are going to stay.
So the station will actually be where the parking spots are?
Yes.
Yeah, not the car.
Okay. So then it would make a straight line, Scott,
Right.
for this, okay.
Right.
Okay. That makes, that is easier to understand. Explain to me about what you said, Michael, about trash integrated into the building versus freestanding.
Okay, there are at least 3 examples that we know of where they've actually carved a room out of the first floor of the rear of the building that faces Flaming Lips Alley to put the dumpsters inside the building with a couple of metal doors like you would see on a freestanding enclosure, but they're actually integrated as part of the building, so it's not sticking out like a freestanding structure.
Okay.
Hampton Inn did that, the Hilton Garden Inn / Homewood Suites did that, and the Criterion concert venue also did that. We felt that's a better way to go, and as a result, when we did the update to the Bricktown guidelines and standards last year, we inserted that as a guideline.
Okay.
That should be followed. However, where they're not going to do that, there is a requirement that it be a masonry wall as opposed to a wood fence like it used to be allowed to do a wood fence. You see a lot of them out there right now. We didn't think that was an appropriate look for Bricktown, so we upgraded the standards to require a brick masonry enclosure. So what you have here is a situation where they originally proposed a wooden fence, which would have required a variance. They've come back to us and told us we can take that wood fence down and put up a brick enclosure and keep it in the OG&E easement in that area.
Okay.
But at the same time, you still have a guideline out there that does say that if it's possible, they should try and integrate the facility into the building as opposed to having it stick out and look more like a freestanding structure. We think they've done a good job with the drawings we've seen of making the freestanding, it's attached to the building, but it looks more like part of the building than it did when it was a wood fence. So we're comfortable with that. It's just a matter of whether or not the committee is willing to waive the requirement or the guideline with respect to the trash room.
Okay, thank you. Also, can you tell me, Scott, what is the height of the current Renaissance?
Of the current Renaissance?
Uh-huh.
Avis, I don't know.
Is this a little less?
This is much lower, yes, than the current
Okay.
Renaissance.
I
I
think
would
it's
guess
maybe
it's 200, 250 feet probably.
Okay. And in the entrance area, the lobby, lounge, is any of that an atrium? Is it a two-level?
It is a high floor-to-floor, so it's an 18-foot floor-to-floor at the first floor, so we will have very high ceilings in there, but it
Okay.
is not two-story. The only place that might be considered two-story would be in that
Right on the
corner
corner.
where the staircase goes up.
Okay. And is this fluorescent lighting strips on the
It'd be
exterior?
LED.
LED, yes.
Listen, you have it's a part of the package here, I think.
Oh, I am. It is kind of a familiar sight anymore
It
in
is.
some areas, so I thought that's what it was. And my next to the last question, a timeline on this? Are we, if it's approved, is everybody ready to go, or how does this work?
We are completing the construction documents right now. The hope is that we'll be starting construction in May.
Okay.
I said in May, in the spring.
And what is the projected time?
This is probably a 12 to 16-month construction.
Okay, okay. And the stucco, is that Tom Wilson and I used to argue with everyone about brick, so I'm just wanting to make sure that the stucco on the alley, if that's acceptable to everyone, is that the only place that it is?
Yes, that's the only place. One of the things that we looked at, I'm trying to find the image now. Honestly, we initially did the backside in all brick, and it was just so heavy and massive, we felt like we needed to change materials. And it is a sort of a traditional thing that you see at the warehouses where the face brick turns the corner and stops, and you go to a common brick or a stucco or a concrete block even in some cases. So it's not something that you don't see in Bricktown.
Oh, yes, I would agree. I think the buildings that are around me, when they turn the corner, they go to a cheaper brick.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all.
Scott, I got a couple more questions. I'm sorry. I don't know if Sandino had.
Yeah, I've got a few.
Okay.
So I think a couple of questions that I had, and I think you answered several of them with some of Ava's comments. The plaster, I guess, what kind of system is going to be used there on the backside?
It would be a plaster system. I mean, it's not an EIFS, but a plaster.
Okay, and I guess I mean, it seems like you guys have addressed it, but it's not really easy to identify. But I think it's Flaming Lips Alley, right? That's the alleyway.
Right.
So when you walk that area, I think I'm just wanting to make sure that we are sort of taking some effort to look at the appearance of the alley. I know that just thinking about how that design interacts with some desire. I know several of the buildings across the street on the alley, I guess going south, have sort of attempted to make good use of that space. And it's always been a challenge because on one side you might have somebody actually operating a business, and on the other side you do have just kind of trash and things in the alley.
Right,
so
right.
I think I would probably tend to agree with Michael that I understand what you guys, based on the site, Matt, based on the tightness of the site, what you've done with the trash enclosure. But can you maybe speak a little bit more to how that alley will be used? Because I'm a little concerned that it'll look more like maybe the alley at the Hampton or something like that, where versus an alley that still is encouraging actual foot traffic, not just service traffic.
Well, none of the functions that we have along there, I mean, we have to have a back of house someplace and be able to service the hotel. So as opposed to servicing it from the streets, we've chosen to service it from the alleyway. I think what we're doing is we're not doing anything to discourage foot traffic along there. We're using masonry and we're using nice materials on that lower level. And I'll see if I can get back to that image again. But I actually think these may be similar bollards to what's actually along the back of where our old office was as well. But all of this is masonry now, and of course the trash enclosure is masonry as well.
And then that other little piece, if you go sort of to the right of, what is that exactly? Is that material-wise?
Hi there. Well, there's like existing electrical equipment that's not really shown there.
That's
and that electrical equipment has a wood bench.
Yeah, that transformer.
We're just enclosing the east side with that fence.
Yeah, and that's not our equipment. That's for the adjacent buildings.
I see.
So there's a trash enclosure and enclosure of some HVAC equipment and things.
Is the existing trash enclosure that's back there, isn't it a wood fence as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is part of it, which is kind of what contributes to the challenge. Okay, so I guess, so obviously the hotel won't have any sort of parking considerations outside of the turn-in there at the entrance.
That's correct. That's correct.
And then, so I guess my other question is a little bit of a comment that might be a question if you're sort of prepared to respond to it. I think personally, like I struggle a little bit with the design because I appreciate a lot what you guys have laid out about the massing and that, and I think that the design in general is a very nice looking hotel, but it just seems like a lot of glass and not very much brick. Or not very much, let me not say brick, but not very much sort of brick or stone elements. And so that, it just sort of from a personal standpoint kind of concerns me a little bit. And so I don't know if you can maybe speak to how you guys got to that point, because I do understand the point about like just the massive volume there. I think that the orientation of the building is right. I think bringing that L to the street versus to set it back. I agree with all of that. But I'm a little concerned, actually. I like the lighting elements, but it just seems like a lot more glass and a lot more light sort of throughout the building versus even if I look at some of the other designs that you guys have done. I think you guys did the Holiday Inn Express, for example, which I think has a really modern element that sort of stands out. And so it's just and then if I look at what the proposed designs are for the garage next door, it gives me a lot more traditional feel. So one of my concerns is with a building that's so massive, I also want to make sure that it doesn't really shift sort of the norm or the perception of what the character of the buildings look like as well.
Yeah. Well, again, the thought was, and then the concern was, how do we break down this scale to get them to more align with the adjacent buildings? I mean, that was the big challenge. I think there's one comment in the guidelines that asks that if we go beyond 80 feet to start stepping back the buildings, functionally that's a really hard thing to do in a hotel because you want your rooms to stack. So we really use that glass to cause at least the effect of feeling like there was a recess or a separation in those elements. So we felt like it was important to break these down into essentially smaller buildings. And I guess I kind of respectfully disagree. I feel like there's really quite a lot of brick and stone on this as opposed to glass, and really the glass is kind of the background element that brings the brick and the stone forward and really emphasizes the brick and stone.
That's probably.
Excuse me. I like the layering effect of the glass and the brick and stepping it back, and it does make it feel like it is stepping back. I also love what you guys have done in the lobby, create that space to the outdoor and bringing the outdoor inside and vice versa, because that's a pretty major thoroughfare of just pedestrians. I think this is a very nice project, and I hope it does happen. How is parking in that area going to be addressed?
Well, my understanding right now from the developer is that he will be leasing spaces from Don Karchmer and that they will be valet parking to the surface lots right now until Don decides to proceed forward with his garage, and then they will be leasing space in the garage.
Okay. I don't have any more comments on the building itself. And since you guys did the garage, can I just have one question on the garage part? Yeah. Has there been any talk about residential units up at the top?
On the garage, no.
On the garage?
I mean, we have talked about it, but Don does not.
Okay.
That's not the business that he wants to get into.
Gotcha. And on the hotel, is there, the roof part, has there been any talk about either a roof deck or any kind of a...
Again, it has been talked about, but the owner has decided that they don't want to take that on from an operational standpoint.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one more question, Scott. Is there an entrance on the east side where the walkway is?
No, there's not. We again, that was something that was explored for a while, but there's some desire to really limit the entrances to Oklahoma and to Sheridan, really for a management issue as much as anything. I really like that idea.
Well, me too.
Myself. But
it's just one more way to open that up to the community.
It's just a challenging ground floor because there's so much, there's just so much that has to happen back of house, and we even looked at schemes to where we located some back of house services on the second floor, but functionally it just did not work well. It just created a lot of logistic problems. So at one time we were trying to create a corridor that would open onto the alleyway, but it just did not flow with the services that they were wanting to offer.
The alleyway, that's going to be a busy alley now, isn't it?
It will be, yeah.
Yeah, because everybody kind of has to do a waltz even now to get everything in and out.
In and out, right.
But I'm sure that's all doable.
Yes.
Okay, well, I do understand what Sandino is commenting about, but on the other hand, I feel like that the tone is definitely set, that it is brick in Bricktown, but with a bit of flair, and I kind of like that because, and I like the difference between this parking garage and the hotel. I like the
Variety.
it's just kind of serendipity to an extent that it's a mixed neighborhood, and indeed we are.
Right.
So I do think it's a nice project. I look forward to it. It's hard to imagine something that tall there, but if I were putting money in that hotel, I wouldn't. I mean, you can't have a 5-story hotel, so I understand.
Correct.
Nice project.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
Well, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there anybody that wants to comment on the project? Sorry.
Second.
The motion should clarify that the trash enclosure is a brick wall enclosure as opposed to the one that's shown to you on your packet.
So
The wooden-
item number 6, we strike out on that.
Correct.
So do I need to restate the motion?
Yeah, I would just move approval with a change that the trash enclosure in the OG&E easement is a brick enclosed structure.
To the motion, I would add that the trash enclosure is now going to be a brick enclosure.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Would like to oppose.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
So we have 2 ayes and 1 opposed. Item number 7, other business, the election of officers.
Yes, we put this on the agenda because the committee had continued it from a previous meeting to this meeting, so that's why we put it on here. We do expect new appointees to come on board any week, so I would suggest that you continue this to a subsequent meeting, maybe two. Do we have cases for April?
No, we do not.
Can I move that we continue this to our regularly scheduled meeting in May?
And Lisa,
Okay.
what did you say just now about new?
I expect we'll have additional committee members just any week.
I thought they had been selected, have they not?
I've been told they've been selected, but they haven't appeared on a council agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
So we have a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
It's to May.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item number 8, communications, 8A, administrative approval report.
We have 4 items for your information that have been approved administratively since your last meeting. 2 of them are extensions, one to the hotel under construction on the east side of Lincoln, out on the easterly part of the Bricktown area, and the second being the extension to the Bricktown side of the work associated with the Union Station upgrades and the tunnel that goes through the tracks. So those two cases were extended for 2 years to allow them time to complete their project within the life of the active CA. This is the 2 East California building, that is the Zio's building. They've got an approval to provide some canal-level patio deck areas and stairways and railings. And then in addition, the Brickopolis golf shack, if you will, got approval to install an awning on one side of the building. And that's completes the administrative approval report.
Any additional comments?
No.
Any comments from committee?
Yeah, I got a couple of questions, actually. So that item number 2 in the administrative report,
Yes.
is that the entrance from the Santa Fe Depot?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Santa Fe Depot, not
Okay.
Union Station.
Okay, I was just trying to make sure I had, so they're extending, I guess wanting to extend the,
Right now, they appear to be concentrating all their work on the downtown side of the tracks, and so it seems as though a lot of the work that's going on the east side of the trellis is going to be coming up in the next 2 years. So,
Right,
Okay.
the CAs are only good for 2 years.
Sure.
You have to extend it.
yeah, well, you kind of told me what I wanted to know, which is, I was just kind of curious how that sort of element is progressing if they needed to extend it another 2 years. One other just question that you may or may not know about, but have we seen or heard anything else from the designers on the hotel at where the Body Works place used to be, the other?
I believe that they have submitted construction drawings, and I think that they've been cleared, but I'm not certain of that. But they do appear to be making progress toward completing the project. So,
Okay. And the last question, which you may or may not be prepared to answer, but you've done good so far, so I appreciate it, Michael, is the so-called parking lot over not that, but the so-called parking lot next to Criterion.
southeast
southeast
corner of
octopus,
Joe Carter and Sheridan.
thing is, yeah. Is there any, I think I read something about some changes there. Is there just any update or any new information you have about the
The latest that I know about that is that the applicant attempted to use that lot as parking for the Criterion without making the improvements that were required pursuant to the CA that was approved by this committee. I believe that the property owner now is aware of the fact that he can no longer do that, and the scuttlebutt, word on the street I've heard is that he's perhaps not going to pursue making those improvements and may be pursuing a more permanent use for that property as opposed to the parking lot.
All right, thanks. That's what I was curious about, if there was any movement on what we had approved. Thank you.
He can still use the westerly part that already is developed as a parking lot, although not up to the specs that we would like to see it done, but that part already is developed as a parking lot, and he can continue to use that part, but the gap between that lot and the Criterion cannot be used as parking.
Thank you.
Michael, one last question. I noticed on some of the drawings on this Renaissance presentation that the Cummins lot still showed that building on it, proposed building, to the east of the Nona's painted door building. It seems to me that's been quite a while since that came up, and is that just off the table?
We have not seen any progress being made towards that one. I'm not sure what the timeline is for the 2-year approval period. They're probably at least a year into that, maybe 18 months. We have not had any contact from them. We don't know. I have not seen any construction drawings come across my table for clearance in compliance with the CA. So my guess is they're just determining whether there's a market to go ahead and make the expense of building that building.
I actually thought the 2-year period had probably passed, and then I was surprised to see it, so I thought maybe I had missed something.
I'm sure that it'll expire sometime this year, so I'll take a look at that and get back to you.
Yeah, and I get the impression that ADG probably had it on theirs to make the case for the massing on that street.
Could be.
Yeah, I don't know that it was necessarily suggesting something's coming.
Thank you, Michael.
So our next meeting date may not be in March, it may be in April. It may not be in April, it may be in May.
Right, and we have been in contact with the people that purchased the building next to the miniature golf course, and they were targeting April, but they've been in contact with us recently, and they've told us that they are targeting submittal in time to be on that May agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. That concludes our meeting. Any comments from? All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Well, I want him to set a motion.
So I don't need to second this, right? Okay.
Thanks, guys.